to make sure to do all my checks and stuff. But we are allegedly live anyway.
Okay.
So
Michael's
good.
picture is not there.
What's this?
Yeah, pictures.
Which pictures?
Of Michael.
Oh, Mihal's pictures.
There we go.
I can almost see him. Yeah. Now that's better.
Oh, right. Happy days. I couldn't see Mihal. We're live anyway. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's stream. All right, 1 second. We have comments on one side, but they haven't gotten through yet. Maybe they're fresh comments. Anyway, if everybody can hear us, definitely send us a comment to make sure you can hear us and see us and stuff. But today, I suppose, between our channel that's all kind of live streamed together, we're going to be covering the topic that is cattle raiding in medieval Ireland. What was it called? Just go around doing my checks and stuff before you guys start to do anything important and stuff. Mihal, how are you keeping today? How are you doing?
All good. Hand cameras all over the place. I woke up. I fell asleep after work, and then I woke up in a panic. I thought, oh my God, it's about an hour away. I thought I'd missed the live again. I have a habit of doing that. So,
oh Jesus
Kat,
Christ.
who's probably Katzel is obviously on all our channels. She knows all about that. So yeah, I've missed many a live from doing it. So, just if ever I don't appear, obviously, just for the other new members, it's normally because I've fallen asleep.
Poor Mihal. You're getting old now. We'll have to bring you back soon and just turn you off like. Shane, how are you keeping today? Is it 10 o'clock? Yeah. I suppose it is that time. I see. I normally pick the reason why I pick this time and drag the boys up all night. Is because I just get up around this time. You say it's about 6 a.m. in Japan right now. I'm living over in Japan, escaping the old housing crisis and stuff. So living out here in Japan for a wee bit, and it's about 6 a.m. here. So it's about 6 here. So this is about the time that it's about 10 o'clock for you guys, and I think over in America it's about 5 o'clock or so for you guys. So I normally pick around this time. Yeah. So
I've been up since 6 o'clock this morning.
Jesus.
Because my daughter there was a bus leaving school very early, going down for a rugby blitz in Cork. So if I might well fall asleep. That's a meeting.
I'm the same.
Keep your voice up all night. Don't worry.
It's fine. I don't mind. I've had my old man snooze now. I can stay awake till about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning now.
All right, that's grand. And Jim, how are you keeping? How is everything going for yourselves? I'm doing grand. Owen, how are you keeping tonight? You're a bit sleepy. Get up to much over the weekend.
I'm wreck tired. I just say hello. Hi, Dennis. Nice to see you here. No, I'm fine. I just had a very, very long day and a long week. I've been very busy, so I'm staring out into blackness. The days are getting shorter and shorter here now. It's winter.
I know.
It's winter in 2 weeks.
I
think go by the old calendar where winter is the 1st of November.
Okay. Just 1 second there, just setting up. You see, when I have got things in the background, I'm trying to do A, B, and C. But we'll try to. I won't keep you up all night anyway. We'll try to get this done in the old 2 hours. I prepared 1 or 2 questions for you lads on the old topic on cattle raiding for this week. It's definitely a topic that a lot of people are definitely looking forward to. The first comment here, and I'll pin it to myself and I'll post it up there, is what was the primary purpose of cattle raiding in the medieval era? Economic gain, warfare, or social privilege? What was the primary purpose of cattle raiding in the medieval era? Owen, you don't mind if I annoy you first and ask you what was the main purpose of the cattle raiding?
No problem. I would say it was a bit of everything. One was to to capture plunder as such, to capture wealth for the cows, to, if you had a rival, to bring them down a bit by taking away some of their wealth, which leads on to warfare. It is a very effective form of warfare by removing the economic base, should we say, of your opponent. And then carrying out a raid is good for your prestige. It gives you a name if you're a small little person and you carry out a raid on someone very big and successful. If you carry out a raid on the government, if the government or a senior lord is unable to protect his clients, that damages his prestige and it improves the other people. So it's a bit of everything.
What I do like about cattle raiding, to be quite honest with you, is the lack of violence as well it brings. I know this as well. So far, statistically, the research that I have looked at, it seems to me compared to, and I don't want to talk ill about England and stuff, but when you look at private wars in England, the skirmish level and the death rate seems to be a lot higher than what we see in Ireland. In Ireland, it seems to me that when a private war kicks off between two noble lords, the death rate seems to be a lot lower from my understanding of the literature. It seems to be a case of young groups of war bands go into someone else's territory. They take the cattle, bring it back to their territory, and there's a certain level of subjugation going on. But the death rate seems to be a lot lower than what we see over in England, that when we see a private war, it seems to turn into at times a bloodbath between multiple lords. What do you think of that, Owen?
Yeah, in part because, say, if you're talking about on the continent where lords are fighting each other, especially in, say, high medieval times, the way war is portrayed there, they tend not to portray cattle raiding and stuff because that's not proper warfare. They will, the chroniclers and stuff, they will focus on a more chivalric type of warfare. And of course, they're going to exaggerate the results. But so Lord Henry, whatever, he went out and with one blow he killed 7 people and then he killed another 100, which you find everywhere. But if you look at, there would have been small scale cattle raiding going on all over the place. And a lot of it, yes, was very, I won't say non-violent, but I will say very unviolent. Especially because in Ireland, population was lowish. So people were good at getting out of the way because a lot of the land was heavily forested. There were a lot of bogs. Villages tended to be small. So when you're attacking somewhere, you can probably go grab a whole pile of cows and skedaddle without running into many people. One exception would be when there's war going on with the English. When the English were raiding the Irish, especially say in the 9 Years' War, they would tend to slaughter a lot of people on purpose. But Irish, they wouldn't do that much. But I would say, like, if you look at Scotland, the border raiding there, the border reivers, I would say, again, it's just small numbers involved, so not many people getting killed.
Yeah, it definitely does seem that way. Michal, what's your interpretation on that question of what is the primary purpose of cattle raiding in medieval Ireland? What's your interpretation on that question?
Yeah, so I agree on the statement that it can be unviolent, but I think we also need to distinguish the reason for whatever the reason is for the raid will also attribute the death toll and the violence used for it as well. I mean, what can be attributed to or be claimed to be a raid in sources such as the annals, a wider context needs to be put into place on why they're raiding. If you're raiding for the crack, basically, I actually just quickly diverge for a second. I always thought it's it's pronounced crack in or crack in Munster. But I always wonder if there's some correlation between having the crack and going out and raiding. So, but going back to it, if you're going out raiding, and it would depend on the reason for it, on how much violence will be involved. If you are just going out to subjugate, make a point, maybe a sort of local dispute, sure, maybe unviolent. But if you're going out to dominate, to deal with problematic people, maybe someone who is a claimant to your titles, it may still be written down as a raid or something like that. But there's obviously going to be a different level of violence involved with that. So it just depends on the reason behind the raid, as well as which will attribute what is happening on the ground.
Yeah, I do actually agree with you on that one, because I do notice when reading the Annals of Ulster and studying it from the perspective of the Viking Age, for example, that you do get eras, like everyone expects the Viking Age from 793 to around 1014 to be constantly high peak, high level of violence. But that's not actually the case. There's periods where, you do have a raiding season and the violence doesn't seem to be that high. But then you've got other periods and seasons where violence seems to be very, very high, and people are looking to make statements. I think the key word you're using there is what's the purpose of that raid happening? Because maybe it's not always to subjugate. Maybe it really is to show force that, hey, you've been taking the piss out of me. For example, the relationship between the Southern Inel in the Kingdom of Meath and the Kingdom of Dublin. I have noticed that when the Kingdom of Dublin, the Vikings as people like to call them, when they take the piss out of the Kingdom of Meath, I have noticed that they go in purposely into Dublin to smash up Dublin to show, hey, look, if you take the piss out of me, I will wreck you up. Compared to other raids where it seems to be that they're other seasons where violence is quite low, it seems that the Southern Inel are more than happy to just go into the area of Dublin, do a local cattle raid, and then go back into their settlement again without violence being all that high. So yeah, I definitely would agree with you. It definitely does seem to be a seasonal thing.
I think the purpose of the raid, the purpose of the attack is very, very important, because although the Gaelic Irish, the lords, etc., were very, very, very sensitive about honor, they were very snobs, and they looked down on bullocks or churls or whatever, there was actually a shortage of labor. So you needed people to plant your crops, to harvest your crops, to build your walls, to knit or sew your clothes, etc., etc. So it was rare for Gaelic Irish, when they're raiding someone, to be wanting to kill these people, because they were important. But if you look at France in the 100 Years' War, or rather England attacking France in the 100 Years' War, they had something. It's a French word which I'm going to butcher. It's a word for shiva. I can't remember what it is, but it's a specific type of raiding, of burning, of plundering. So when I think it's Henry IV, like in the campaign that ends up in Agincourt, sort of the English army.
Oh, Henry V.
Henry V. Okay, one of them. I got the right name.
They do blur into each other, Henry IV into Henry V. Yeah.
Like the English army is, and sometimes they brought Gaelic Irish with them to do this. They're going out raiding the French countryside, and they're plundering. Oh, someone's actually corrected, given it the right spelling, but not. Unfortunately, they can't leave a voice message. Pronunciation. So this is a very damaging, a very violent type of plundering. I'm not an expert on the 100 Years' War, but I think they would have killed a lot of people when they were doing that. They basically laid waste to large parts of France. Whereas,
I know that there's a manuscript written by a priest during the Hundred Years' War, and he mentions the Irish and the fact that their raiding habits, where the fact that they have captives over cattle as they're driving both out of townlands. And they were shocked by this sort of tactic that is being used in the Hundred Years' War. I can't remember. Oh, I can't get Lanacroft on my head, which is Scottish, not French. But I can't remember the manuscript. But they definitely weren't used to Irish style of warfare. But by this stage, obviously, the Hundred Years' War, you're kind of at the height of, like you said earlier, chivalry. It's a different type of warfare, whereas Ireland's not been feudalized so much. Even though we're taking part in feudal wars, we're not really accustomed to that. We still have our own unique ways.
It depends what part of Ireland you're talking about. I did notice when I was researching cattles, the tower houses and stuff, that if you look at the Leinster area, castles are more built for conservative style warfare. And also the castles, the ideas that were developed in castle making in France and in the Middle East during the Crusades, a lot of that development had made its way into the Leinster area. Not only because, that was the area that was dominated by the Anglo-Irish, but also the terrain favored more conservative style warfare, as in big, massive, large armies being able to go in and siege. Like, you can see that, like, it's not just the Anglo-Irish who are doing it. During the later stages of the middle stages of the 100 Years' War, around 1370 to 1399, Artmark Mara Cavanagh is using conservative style sieging to siege castles around the Leinster area. So it's not just the Anglo-Irish who are using conservative style sieging. But regardless, my point being, if you were to then travel up to more of the northern western area where the terrain is more difficult to siege, it's more hillish, more boggy areas, more forestry, then you're going to see castles that are adapted more to kind of cattle raiding warfare. And it brings into debate, like, is every single tower house used for, storing cattle, which we'll cover in a bit, or are castles more built for siege warfare and stuff? And in my opinion, especially after doing that video and stuff on tower houses in the late medieval period, I would say that it depends on the location of the tower house and the purpose of the tower house. But we can get into more detail about that later on. Or if somebody's got a question in there, we can tear that apart as well.
Dennis has asked a question there about judging the success of a raid.
Yeah, give us a second there. Do we know how they judged how successful a raid was? A number of cattle taken or a number of actual taken in a herd of the raid, or distance of the raid, or who they raided? Do you want to take that apart, Owen?
Yeah, I'd say, again, it's a bit of different, like, obviously, if you are a minor McCarthy and you down in Kerry or in Desmond, as it was, and you do this big raid on the lands of the Earl of Desmond and come out back with 1,000 head of cattle, you're going to make a name for yourself. And probably that's going to get written down in the annals. Of course, when it gets written down, or when someone makes a poem of it, the 1,000 head could become 10,000 head. So it's a bit like, what's the best football match? Sort of, some raids would have been much more successful, but nobody remembers them because it might have been two little lords against each other, or just that whatever got written down about these raids never survived, or nothing got written down about them. It's a very hard question to answer properly. But I think a lot comes down to prestige, people talking about it, etc. And then, like, if you're a big lord, if you're one of the big McCarthys or an O'Brien, and you carry out a raid, you're going to have your poets writing nice poems about you.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
probably go ahead.
No, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, but it kind of goes back to our first point, or my first point that we kind of elaborated on what is the objective. So if you reach your objective, whether that's subjugating, whether
Yeah,
that's
good point.
then that's considered a successful raid. You could Brian Baru went to the north. He took hostages. He took cattle. But it took him 3 attempts. He had to do it 3 times. So you could say the first two, even though he had these victories, they weren't successful because they were successful in the fact that he came back with cattle and hostages, but they didn't achieve his objective. So I guess it's and your analogy of football is another great example in that you could play a Premier League team as a lower league team and beat them, but if it's just a friendly, it doesn't mean as much that if you beat someone
Yeah.
who's the same as your peer, who is maybe it's a cup final, So again, if you use those analogies to sort of get that interpretation of, it sort of becomes a little bit clearer. I feel so.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like in, I think, 1598 or 1599, one of the sons of Fiach Mac Hugh O'Byrne, he raided Dublin City. Okay, at this stage, this part that he raided was outside Dublin City, but he reached the bawn of St. Patrick's Cathedral. So that at that stage was just outside the city, but it's still right in the heart of the Elizabethan administration in Dublin. So that was, he may have taken one cow and a couple of chickens, but he was able to reach this place, which if you go there now, you could walk to Dublin Castle in 5 or 10 minutes.
Mm.
So that was a dramatic raid.
Mm. Just heading on a wee bit and grab another question for you guys. 1 second there. And I just want to thank Rex there for all the feedback as well. You've got some amazing comments there, Rex. Definitely keep it up there, especially when we trip over ourselves when we go outside of our field of expertise with the likes of the 100 Years' War and stuff. Just to bombard you guys again with another interesting question. How did seasonal movement of cattle, Boeing, I'm probably butchering that word completely. Is that Irish
Bullying.
or English, Owen?
I think it comes from Irish, but the English used it became a word, bullying. It's
Bullying.
the movement of cattle.
Influence when raids occurred. Owen, you don't mind exploring that question, do you?
Yeah, so basically bullying is moving traditionally from um, the cattle would be in more upland areas during the summer, and they would come down to more lowland areas in winter, or areas closer at home in winter because the days uh, are shorter. Um, Another thing is like the cattle are closer to home in winter, but the days in winter are very, very short. So if you know the area, it's very good for you to be able to move around and surprise people because you know the area. So a small group of you can go very quickly and capture a lot of stuff. And uh, in Ireland, like if you have to go up, the Irish mountains are not very high, but if you try to go up there to catch a whole pile of cows and bring cows 500 meters down a mountain, where there's bogs, where I'm not sure how much gorse there was, but there's probably forests. That's not the easiest thing to do. But if the cows are near a settlement, they're all together, it's much easier to capture them and to move them. I know that Dennis was watching as a farmer, and he has moved cows, and I said it before, but it's not the easiest thing, and so have others. So you're trying to move a whole 100, 200, 300 or more cows. You're also keeping an eye out for enemies. It's easier when the cows are all together. And
It's
like on a long summer day, you can be seen. It's much easier. You'll be spotted much easier.
but I suppose as well, a lot of these settlements in the early medieval period would also have roads as well. So I suppose it would be easier if they're close to the settlement and the area around the settlement, not the settlement itself, but the area around the settlement is attacked and the cattle, they're trying to lure the cattle away to get them onto the roads as quick as, and then start kind of pushing them up the road to their settlement. It would be
Yeah,
more easier for them to attack, or am I just completely waffling shy?
yeah, it probably would. And again, like you're trying to drive cattle down a mountainside
Mm,
where the paths are less good. It's going to be more difficult.
mm,
You're and again, a lot would also depend on the area. Like
yeah.
you mentioned Mead. If if I'm an O'Reilly coming from Cavan to raid Mead, Westmead, somewhere like that,
Mm,
I raid into this area which is much flatter. It's been tamed, shall we say, a lot more. It's easier for me to attack it. Whereas if I'm someone going in the opposite direction, trying to raid the O'Reillys, uh, like there's a great danger I'm going to ride into a lake or something. Like in Cavan and Monaghan, it's full of lots of little lakes as well as bogs and drumlins.
mm. Just a question in from Era there. What's your opinion on medieval animals that were just let into Ireland? Era, are you talking about our, what was it called? Animals that were introduced from Britain into Ireland, or are you talking about other animals that were brought over? I'm
I,
not quite sure about that
I
question.
presume he means because the Normans introduced a lot of animals.
Uh,
Um, I think the Normans introduced rabbits.
mm,
Mm.
They brought in some deer. Um, they would have brought in better horses, um, and stuff like that. I know they brought in a lot of big mammals, and maybe they brought. I don't know enough about cow breeds.
mm.
Uh, if they brought in particular types of cow.
Mm. Interesting. All right. And Mihal, what's your interpretation on how did the seasonal movement of cattle influence when raids occurred? What's your interpretation on that one? Do you find it would
Yeah,
be?
it's no, I find it depends because we have examples of it happening through the literature. We have examples of it happening in different times of year. Obviously, we have a set standard, but there are exceptions to where it happens outside of the norm. And obviously, so you have, whether it's is it normally the herds are let out around early
Mm.
May, and then you've got summer raids that are they're
Oh, do we lose Mihal? I
Oh,
think Mihal slightly
oh,
froze there, and it can happen. Just popping
lightly
over to
protected
Thomas's
upland
comment
herds, but
there.
then you've
One,
also you know
Carlo went to the. Oh,
um,
there. Sorry. Yeah, just slightly.
right.
We'll jump back over to your comment actually. Sorry there, Mihal. Would you like to elaborate on that one again?
Yeah, I seem to have froze there for a second. Yeah, so yeah, if you go to autumn, the cattle's fatter. So it may be more profit for your yield for your work. But like I said, there's things to take into consideration when they're hiring mercenaries. When mercenaries are being hired, like the red shirts are coming across in summer for
Mm,
the summer months. And then there's also you've got to take into consideration about who you're raiding.
mm,
Like if you're heading past, maybe you've got to go past friendly or enemy territory. That's going to impact how you bring them back, and therefore the logistics of moving the cattle. But like I said, we've also, I mean, there's records in 818 of 941 of cattle being herded across the ice of Loch Ness. You know, and that obviously, uh, has is going to be a hard, that's hard winter exception. So even when there's a particularly hard winter, there are exceptions being made. So yeah, I think it depends on when you want to do it, really, and the reason why you're going to be doing it.
Yeah.
Something else that would have had an impact is the harvest, because like in the Elizabethan period, you see lots of talk about many Irish soldiers not wanting to fight during harvest time because they want to go home back to their lands to cut out to harvest the crops, which they need to survive for another year. And there was a lot of crops grown, especially oats and barley. And one of the things about that, you don't want to be raiding someone when they're cutting a lot of harvesting a lot of crops, because probably there'll be a lot more people around, many of whom will have access to swords and stuff like that. So you could come unstuck if you raid at the wrong time when who you're raiding has a lot of armed men.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. But yeah, I noticed the same thing as well, because I'm covering the Norman invasion of Ireland right now over on my Patreon every Sunday night, guys, if you want to sign up. However, regardless, I noticed that harvesting season has a huge impact on the warfare at the time, because right now the war bands are being pulled from the Munster area over to Leinster, and yet they're constantly complaining that they need to get back to Munster to continue their harvesting and finish it all up. Not so much the harvesting itself, the planting of the crops and stuff, but actually pulling the harvest up and stuff and getting ready for the winter, because most of the sieging and stuff starts to really build up around the September period. And it's that point that people need to get back to the fields and stuff. And the problem with the Norman invasion of Ireland is that it's already been a bad summer when it comes down to getting the most out of the harvest and stuff, especially then when it goes into winter, it starts to have a real effect on the food and everything. And that's looking at it from more of a conservative warfare perspective, where, it's army on army. Never mind when you're dealing with cattle raiding, which is specifically designed to deplete you as much as possible.
Yeah. And just in relation to cattle, grass is very important. Because if you're, say, an English army attacking a Gaelic lord, if you prevent them moving their herds of cattle around, their herds of cattle may start to starve, because that's essentially the basis of bullying. You move them from one, and it's the basis of, I think, most farmers now. They're not called cow farmers. My brain is tired. Farmers who have cows, like they'll move them from field to field. So you have to leave areas without cows for a specific period for grass to grow, because otherwise the cows will eat all the grass and then start to starve. And that is a factor that is important in warfare, in big warfare, or just cattle raiding as well, one that people tend to forget.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, because when I mostly think about the movement of cattle, I always look at it from, okay, so the bullying happens around, what was it called? May. And then the cattle are kind of just dumped out in the hills and stuff until around this period, the end of October, and then they're pulled back in again. That's how my brain imagined it. But yeah, it makes more sense that there is more movement of cattle around the place. Just popping over to the
Dairy
questions. Sorry.
That is putting it dairy, but what about beef farmer? Beef farmers was the word I was missing.
Anybody that wants to send us anything, I don't know about Michal and Owen, but if anybody's looking to send me anything, first and foremost, send me a message over an Irish Medieval History on Instagram. These days, I know in the past I've been like, oh yeah, message me on message me over on Patreon, message me over on Discord as quick as you can and stuff, and I'll get back to you as soon as. It's actually these days, it's actually, I found Instagram is actually the quickest way to give me an old text, the quickest and easiest way. So if anybody wants to message me or anything, just head over to my Instagram, Irish Medieval History, if you want to send us a message or anything. I don't know about you guys, Michal and Owen. if you guys want to even want to be contacted after this show.
I'm happy to, but I'm hard to get hold of. Like I just disappear for weeks on end. So you can send me whatever you want, but don't expect a quick.
Just popping over to the next question for you guys. What role did young warriors play? I've got the Athenian here playing cattle raiding during the this period and stuff. I know in my own personal experience of reading about the cattle raiding and stuff that definitely when you read the likes of the Finn cycle and stuff, which is very much concentrated on young men such as not Finn McCool himself, but his the kid, the boys he's training and stuff, and also the likes of Cucullum and stuff. It's very orientated around young men. What's you guys' interpretation on that? I'll start off with Mihal when it comes down to this question and bully you for a bit. Mihal, what's your interpretation on the role that young warriors play during this period?
I suppose that the short answer is that the prime movers, in many raids. I mean, I think timeline as well for from my interpretation, and I know the Vienna is something that you is a more of a speciality for you, but from my interpretation, they're more early medieval, although the term, but the same people still exist doing it in later centuries. It's just the cohort sort of youthful retainers sort of remains across the years, but I would associate the Fianna with the sort of early medieval period. But basically, it's just seasonal bands of like landless young aristocrats, and eventually they become more what I've interpreted as more like horsemen and kern. From about the 14th century, 13th, 14th century. But, they're good. They're there primarily, if we just get past that bit, is they're young warriors that did the scouting, the striking, the driving of the herds, and they're doing it as well. It works as it sort of functions as a rite of passage, a route to status and like payment. So I think, the role is probably the most pivotal role. Without that need, that drive for young men to strive to earn status, to earn pay, to earn, it almost removes the largest pool of recruitment you would have for it anyway. So it almost null and voids it, because you're not going to get the old, the infirm, the really young to take part in it. So it's like the modern military today. Why do most people join the modern military today? It's because most young men want to go out and see the world, to experience something that they would never experience living on the streets of Belfast or Dublin. The case in point for the question is I think they're the prime movers of the raid.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. All right. Owen, what's your interpretation of the role that the Fenian play, well, young war bands play during cattle raids?
Yeah, well, first, I agree with most of what Michael said, but I think when you're taking annals and stories, you have to bear in mind that a lot of these are like ideal types. It didn't always happen that way. And I think undoubtedly a lot of young guys would have gone raiding, whether for their crack, whether to start making their name, whether to gain experience, or to gain, like, if you wanted to say get married and you needed money to settle down. Hopefully, if you go on a raid, you'll gain something. In relation to in the 16th century, there's a lot of the English write a lot about horse boys, sort of. So there were young boys, sort of, I don't know what age it would be, 12, 13, 14, 15, who would follow the Gaelic forces and sort of would mind their horses or even keep because if it was a very large movement by a Gaelic force, they would bring a large number of cattle with them. And sometimes these young guys are moving the cattle. So they would also have to play a role in defending. Because like there's two sides to cattle raiding. There's attacking and there's defending. And for example, if it's summer and the cows are all up the mountains, there would still be people up there. They would have to keep an eye out for wolves, for example, to keep an eye on the calves. I presume, and if it was dairy cattle, I don't know what the story was about milking the cows, but there would have been a lot of work for young men, and I presume young women, in looking after the cows as well as going raiding. If it wasn't a very important raid, I'm sure you would have got a huge number of volunteers. These guys, they want to start making a name for themselves.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. All right. Shane, I'm assuming you're coming over from Brehon Academy's live stream right now. I know Brehon Academy is live streaming the story of the Irish language right now over on his channel. Just to answer your question of what language was the Irish people speaking before the Celts, I'm assuming you're talking about the insular Latin culture between 300 BC to 90 AD. So what were they speaking before 300 BC? I'm assuming that's what you're saying, unless you're looking at the recent DNA study and stuff, which is, using the word Celtic, which goes back to 2800 BC. But I'm assuming you're actually talking about 300 BC and not 2800 BC. What markers existed in the Irish Celtic language? Sorry if it's off topic. No, I don't have any problems with that. The only thing is I'm not a linguistic myself, to be quite honest with you. So what they were speaking before, so you're talking about before 300 BC. What language were the Irish speaking before 300 BC? To be quite honest with you, I'm not a linguistic, so I couldn't be able to answer that for you. And also on top of that as well, I'm not sure. There is no literature to be able to support any argument that I could make, to be honest with you, to what they were speaking beforehand. I do know linguistics that have like high standards in the likes of University College of Cork and stuff, can find little bits of words and been able to do proper study into them to find links into an Indo-European language that existed before the arrival of Irish onto the island and stuff. But that's way out of my field of expertise, to be honest with you. Men, do you have any idea what language was spoken before 300 BC?
Though at some stage it was Indo-Europe. Probably Irish goes back further. My feeling is 500, maybe 800 BC. But when Indo-European became Irish, I don't know. Again, that's way out of my field. And in the Bronze Age or Neolithic, I don't think we have any idea.
Yeah.
There are mysteries we don't know.
Yeah, I do mean to get, because there's another doctor from Maynooth University. He was very, very active about 2 years ago, and I want to get in contact with him to see if he's jumping back onto YouTube again anytime soon.
Is it David Sifter?
Yeah, that's the one. He was very active on YouTube 2 years ago, and
he's a professor of Old Irish, and he knows his Indo-European, but I would say he would not. He would say there's no way to answer that question.
Yeah, because we have so little to work with. We are still. I was watching one of his videos from 2 years ago on YouTube, and he was saying that God, you put your fingers together and you pray that somehow somebody digs up a manuscript from around 300 BC. That would be absolutely magnificent, because you do get little segments of an idea that they are writing stuff down, but it's trying to find a complete manuscript or something would be absolutely amazing, because they have little what's it called? The women who do their little sewing and stuff, they have little things written by their husbands and stuff, like "get me a beer" and stuff. So it gives us an idea that they are writing stuff, especially around what was it, 90 AD and stuff. But we don't have. I haven't come across. There is no manuscript so far found. Hopefully, like one day in a bog somewhere, we can find an entire manuscript dated to around 90 AD
Yeah.
or something, or
The
even earlier
earliest,
than that.
as far as I'm aware, the earliest writing in Ireland is from St. Patrick.
Yeah, because I was about to say that because Liam has Old Irish, and the word, because obviously I'm assuming Old Irish is a modern word, and Old Irish is dated to around what was it, 550 to up to around 900 AD, isn't it? And then you start to go into Middle
Yeah.
Irish. It starts to blur into Middle Irish after that. So Old Irish isn't from 300 BC. But great questions. I really, really like your questions, guys. So no problems there with that one. Was the young warriors, the young Fenians, young warriors is Ugluk, isn't it? Young warriors is Ugluk in Irish. I'm assuming that the Ugluk could be used as lookouts, especially for more professional kerns, because I do actually agree with that one, actually, that you could actually use the Ugluk, depending on the situation and the scenario. I do agree with Jim that you could actually use the young warriors as lookouts, as the more veterans, depending on the scenario. Obviously, if the scenario is quite light, send in the young warriors and get them to the cattle raiding for you. But if it's a much more tighter scenario, where you've got more enemy to be dealing with and stuff, I would definitely have the young warriors on lookout and send in the current to get them out and over. But the only problem with that, obviously, is from my because that was more of my military mindset. From my medieval mindset of looking at manuscripts and stuff, I haven't come across any tactics being actually written down and documented, to be quite honest with you. Dr. Owen O'Neill, do you know any examples of tactics being written down from the kerns and stuff? Because to be honest with you, I don't know any examples of tactics being written down.
There is stuff like in the Elizabethan Wars. There are some very interesting tactics. There's one that I find very interesting. It's after what's his name, Docra has landed in Lough and he basically has captured most of Inishowen, which is above Derry. And then Hugh O'Donnell attacks, and he attacks across not Lough Foyle, I think Lough Swilly. But his men, they all carry, I find this really interesting, they all carry hurdles as such. And they put them into the at this stage the loch is quite narrow. They put them there and they cross over. So they had this very interesting tactic of they using these hurdles to cross over a water body that would have prevented the English from crossing over. Other stuff, again, this would be more defensive, is what was called plashing, whereby you have a forest and you get the plants, like you have the trees, and with using the trees, you tie them into each other, so you suddenly create an impenetrable barrier. And I'm fairly sure this must have been used as defensive, or if you're disappearing into the forest with a few cows and someone's chasing you, you could do it to stop them coming after you.
Michal, I hate to be giving out to you there, but can you turn off your mic when you're typing away and stuff? Because Owen is trying to talk away there, and all I can hear is you going. Sorry about that, Owen. What was it called? An amazing question there has popped up there in the comments section. Did women take part in cattle raiding in pre-Christian Ireland? We know Celtic society did allow women into high positions of power, such as Boudicca of the Iceni. That's a quite good question, and there's a lot of layers in there definitely to take apart and stuff. In my own opinion, I would definitely look into the laws of the innocents to start with. The laws of the innocent came out around the 7th century, and it was laws that prevented women and children in taking part in warfare at the time, but it also prevented men attacking and killing members of the clergy, women and children, like setting them on fire, attacking them in certain ways that you know of, etc., etc., etc. So I would assume, especially if you look at the likes of the Finn cycle, where you have Cucullum, who was trained by a woman, it does seem to give an indication, from my opinion, that women were perhaps involved with the cattle raiding before the 7th century. Now, the opening thing was pre-Christian. I do believe for the first 200 years, even when Christianity had taken over, we still seen women taking part in cattle raids, in my opinion, by the way. But I think after the law of the innocents is brought out, I don't think women were involved anymore, in my opinion. Mihal, I'll give you that loaded question there. What's your opinion on, did women take part in cattle raiding in pre-Christian Ireland?
I mean, obviously we have, if you look at literature, so the epic tale of the Timebow, the Taun, sorry, you got Queen Maeve of Connacht, planning and commanding the raid itself, and she's the prime mover of the whole sort of war narrative. And this is, the clearest attestation, shall we say, though it's a saga, obviously it's not actually chronicle. So you've got to take that into a bit of consideration, but it, like you've stated, like in law tracks, women are clearly had like economic stakes in cattle, especially if you sort of use early Irish Brehon law. But again, that's another sort of problematic thing to just sort of use that as fact for the statement. But we know that they use Boudica as an example, and she's not the only female queen in Celtic these isles. There's there was a queen of the Brigantes in northern Britain who was also held in quite high context as well, and we know that there were sort of matriloquial groups where like it's female centered in all parts of Britain. And that's not this whole link to the Picts, and that's a different subject. But I'm just saying, on these isles, especially on mainland Britain, there was female-centered king groups, and that was from a study this year, in fact. So, but it's from an old claim anyway. So I would say that it's likely that, especially in the politics side of it, that women would be drivers, movers, especially when you're marrying into family. She's bringing across her political acumen and stuff from her side of the word, and her grudges. If she's an Enale marrying into another, the southern Enale, she's maybe got a problem with Connacht. So I think.
Oh, wait, it's like dip there. Do we have
when you say take apart? It sort of depends. It just.
Has Michal gone again?
I'm not gone. I'm still here.
He's gone again.
It's just real. No, we're here.
Oh yeah, back again.
Yeah, so it just depends. What I was trying to get, the current point is, it just depends on what you mean in taking a role, because there's a lot of roles involved in the planning, taking part, executing, and the aftermath. So, and I think women would have a large part to play in, or not large, but a part to play in most parts of it.
Dr. Owen O'Neill, what's your interpretation on that one? On the did women take part in cattle raiding during pre-Christian?
Well, first of all, I see there that Liam was asking, was it a matriarchal society? No, it wasn't. Women were of a lower status than men.
Mm.
And I think a female slave was the lowest of all. But with any army before, up to say Napoleonic times, if you had a time machine and you were able to go and look at any army, you will find a huge amount of women in the army.
Mm.
They could be cooks, they could be nurses, they could be people fixing clothes, or ladies of the night. Um, all of these followed the armies round. And I'm sure that in some cattle raids, people would have brought women they knew along, sort of sometimes like a partner, a girlfriend, sometimes someone following along doing the cooking. If you look at the 9 Years' War, there are occasional women who are captured in battles, at the end of battles, and they were part of the Gaelic forces. So you would have had some stuff like that. Some Gaelic women, elite women, uh, may have taken part. And again, it would come down to the actual raid, what it was for, how big it
Mm.
was, how far away it was. So there's a possibility, but I would say like there would have been women accompanying them, but the fighting would have been basically men by men.
Yeah. But I do think it depends, as you said there, on the situation.
Yeah,
Because if you're dealing with light cattle raiding and stuff, I can't see, because you see combat sport these days where you've got women who are quite unique, and definitely very much able to defend themselves. But once again, it does depend on the situation, because when you're dealing with then bigger, heavier battles, where the armor and stuff just doesn't fit in with the shape of women and stuff. It can get much more difficult to see women popping up in the literature and stuff, both in not just in Ireland, by the way, during the later stages of the Viking Age, let's say around the 11th century. There's a huge lacking of a certain amount of disappearance of women within the literature and stuff, because if you look at earlier literature, I know it's more on the mythology side, set around the 10th century, around the 9th and 10th century. There's a lot of women in there, as obviously, as you all know from the Viking TV show. You have Loigra, no, sorry, oh, what's her name again? Michal, you'd know this one.
Lagertha.
Lagater, that's the one. You
Lagertha.
have Lagater who pops up. But at the same time, you have various women popping up in Irish literature as well. Literature that's meant to be set around the 9th and 10th century. But then when you get into more of the historical literature of around the 11th century, with the likes of the rise of Brian Boru, and you're dealing with more conventional style warfare, which is 1,000 men against 1,000 men, you suddenly see women suddenly disappearing. And the reason for this is that you're dealing with battles that start up in the very start of the morning, and they go on all the way up to the late evening, around 5 o'clock, until you either have men camping out locally, or they'll literally finish up the battle and go home, compared to fighting that happened more or less around the 8th and 9th century, which is more local raiding, where you go in there, steal what you can, bring it back to your two there, or even your fortification in Dublin and stuff. That style of warfare definitely changes with the likes of the rise of Brian Boru and stuff. So I do, as Dr. O'Neill was saying, it depends on the situation and stuff, because and that's after the law of the innocents is put in place, where you do have women popping up in the mythology side of things. So even on top of that, mythology is mythology. You do have to question, is there any actual real literature where women are popping up as raiders and stuff? And I can't find any actual solid historical literature that points out that women did do raiding after the law of the innocents is brought out, and the law of the innocents is brought out around the 8th century. So it can be very difficult to say, okay, so did women continue raiding after 800 AD going into the Viking Age and stuff, especially when women are targeted during the Viking Age. From the start of the Viking Age onwards, women are targeted. And as Dr. Owen O'Neill has pointed out, and it's also in Fergus Kelly's A Guide to Early Irish Law that literally highlights that women are used as currency and stuff. So going into the Viking Age, women are targeted and they are attacked and they are sold into slavery in Dublin. So would you, even if women are very, very good at martial arts and stuff, would you allow them then to go into the battlefield and stuff, or areas where they're vulnerable to be actually physically taken and then sold into slavery? Would you allow that to happen? These are questions you need to ask, especially if you're putting yourself in the mindset of it and stuff that needs to go out there and raid cattle and stuff. So it's definitely a complicated one, that's for sure. And I could go, comment all day, but then you're going into the opinions and stuff. What else do we have here? Just a quick one on the Egyptians and stuff. Yeah, that's perhaps true and stuff. But the only problem is that you're then jumping around in the different periods and stuff. Because as I pointed out there's definitely massive changes that happen after 700 AD, which is the introduction of the law of the innocents and stuff. Because I would definitely say that Egypt definitely is a completely different society in the 8th century compared to earlier on. When you're dealing with the likes of 300 BC and stuff, where you have a completely different interpretation of women and men.
The Egyptians were basically Greek from around 300 BC. I think that's when Alexander conquered Greece and sets up Alexandria. And before that, for a couple of hundred years, maybe several hundred years, they were ruled by the Persians. So the Egyptian may have been matrilineal, but there's no real connection between Egyptian civilization and Irish and Gaelic civilization. There's a huge difference in time, and the myth about Scotty, I think the earliest that can be found is like the 12th century or something. It was just some Gaelic scribes copying the legend of Moses, the story of Moses, so that there's no comparison.
There's also, just want to say, so in pre-Ptolemaic Egypt and then pre-Persian Egypt, so you're talking real, ancient Egyptian. I would argue the matrilineal sort of society, in the sense that it's not seen in their nobility and their the pharaohs or anything like that. It's still a very patriarchal. Men are taking the role of leadership, using male line lineage for descent. Obviously, the first thing that obviously to spot this, you get to Tutankhamun, who's the 18th dynasty, and they're still 1,000 years away from the Ptolemaic dynasty. So you have all these 18 dynasties are linking themselves through maternal lines to the kingship or the pharaohship. But that's no different to Europe or anywhere else in the world, in the way you use a female line to legitimize your rule if you are an outsider. So I would, I don't know on a ground-to-ground basis on the local inhabitants, and obviously Egypt is made up of multiple societies within Egypt. It isn't a homogeneous society, so you have. Later on, sort of, we'll just say like Galatians and Coptic groups and stuff like that are living within Egypt that may have local matrilineal sort of passing, chieftains or whatever, but it's not replicated in the highest positions of court or rulership. As well with the Picts, it seems that the matrilineal claims are a misinterpretation. It doesn't seem to be recorded anywhere. And again, it may be much like mainland, what would become England, where you have the Brigantes, Icenies, etc., where some of the groups were matrilineal, but it seems to be the localized, not national.
And just heading back into the comment section there, America has hidden ancient civilizations. Yeah, a lot of the Native Americans have been suppressed, sadly. It is believed that they were ruled by women. Which Native American group are you talking about in particular, or are you talking about a pre-Native American group? Definitely comment below and tell me which Native American group that you're talking about, unless somebody in the comment section knows exactly which Native American group he's talking about. Just moving slightly ahead now, 1 second there, and I just want to get the comment there on the how did Brehon law regulate or punish cattle raiding between rival Tuatha kingdoms during the medieval period. I just want to get that one in there. Owen, you don't mind if I bully you this time around with that question? How did Brehon law regulate or punish cattle raiding between rival Tuatha kingdoms?
This is a question. When you're talking about early Irish law, this is a serious question that I have never seen anyone. There are people who say, "Oh, Brehon law was all this wonderful stuff, etc." But this points to the big problem of Brehon law, in that there is no punitive structure as such. You have a very decentralized legal system. Basically, you have local lords have their own judges. So if they go raiding, who's going to punish them? The main punishment would be a counter raid as such. One form of punishment that develops, especially after the law of the innocent, would be the church interfering. It's not to do with cattle raiding. It is slightly to do with cattle. Colm Kill. He caused a big battle because he copied a certain book, and then there was a big fight over it. So I think several hundred people got killed, and he imposed a punishment of exile on himself. And he goes off to Scotland and does a lot of stuff there. And like I know lords were regularly excommunicated and stuff like that. But that didn't seem to have done much good a lot of times. So Brehon law is more of something aspirational in this sort of stuff, because if you're a thief, a poor thief, yes, you can be punished. But if you're a lord, who's going to punish you?
But I always looked at cattle raiding as more of a huge culture thing, like it was encouraged, because I definitely get that idea from the Táin, to be quite honest with you. Reading that, in my opinion, it kind of gives me the interpretation that the Táin was there to encourage this sort of behavior, not discourage it. And when looking at and then reading the likes of Fergus Kelly's A Guide to Early Irish Law, I also then feel, it's the same again, that between reading the Táin and then looking at Fergus Kelly's A Guide to Early Irish Law, it gives me the interpretation that this behavior is encouraged and never discouraged within Irish society. That is kind of a banter, like, I steal your cattle this season, you steal my cattle next season, so on and so forth. I think the only time it's discouraged is when it starts, blood feuds start to get out of hand. Like I even think at first blood feuds are kind of encouraged as well, in a way that, it's a bit of a banter, you lose an eye, you lose a head. But then when it gets out of hand, then compensation starts to go, a bit wild between two Tuatha, in my opinion and my interpretation.
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not sure if the Táin encourages cattle raiding, or if it was just so common or so usual that it was something that was carried on. Because I'm fairly sure that Brehon law has a punishment for theft, but cattle raiding doesn't come under that, because it's between different kin groups, between different power groups, if you like. And whereas Brehon law is more to do, a lot to do with status, to do with, um, sort of a high lord can impose punishments on lower people, but like when people are resisting punishment, when they're doing something, when they're attacking their enemy, who's going to punish them? Nobody.
I think as well. You said like there's punishments for theft. But I mean, if you frame, I guess it's like any lawyer who can frame what the crime is actually. What the law states the crime is and what they're sort of arguing. So if you're arguing there's laws for compensation. So if you use you're a king and you justify your claim that this is compensation for X, Y, and Z, they have insulted my honor, they have done whatever. So I didn't steal these cattle, I took them as compensation, which is well within your rights within Brehon law. I mean, I suppose the counter argument could be, obviously in the Seneca's More there's cross-border treaties, so you could sort of argue that this individual crossed boundaries, therefore broke the law that way. But I guess it really just comes down to you know if you, like you said, Owen, about you local kings are sort of creating their own law. It's really just your law against my law. Your judge is saying that, my judge is saying this. Who's got the biggest stick to win the argument? So I think it can come down to just to that, basically. Bit of corruption.
There is a very interesting example of that in 1593, just before the 9 Years' War kicks off. The English, supported by Hugh O'Neill, are moving against Hugh Maguire. Hugh O'Neill is pretending to fight against Hugh Maguire, and he and Bagnall are advancing around, I think, different sides of Lough Erne against Maguire, and Hugh O'Neill raids Bagnall and captures 300 or 400 cows off him. And then, like, Bagnall complains, and Hugh O'Neill says, "Oh, these cows were yours. Oh, sorry, I must return them." And of course, he never does.
You gotta love you, O'Neill, some character like. Just popping back over to the comment section there. To be honest with you, Jim, I didn't know Indian men were going over to America to set up tribes, to be quite honest with you. Never mind having women lead them. And just popping over to this one here. To be honest with you, the whole study of Native Americans are definitely out of my field of expertise, although I do find it very, very interesting. All right, so definitely keep your comments up there. Not just, because it's a very interesting topic, because it's amazing for my algorithm. So, if you guys want to chat away about did women lead Native American tribes, definitely work away there. I think this one's a very, very good comment. Were abbots as powerful as kings? And I think this is very, very interesting, given that we do have the likes of Armagh and the monastic settlement of St. Finbarrs in Cork, which are very, very active military-wise. So I do find this one a very interesting question. So were abbots as powerful as kings? And did they have their clansmen raid cattle since there were abbots? How was a threat? So what's your interpretation on that one? I'll bully Michal on that one. But just before I bully Michal, I do find it very, very interesting, because at the very start of the Viking Age, we do actually have fighting between Cashel and St. Finbarr's monastic settlement in Cork, which eventually does lead to oh my God, his name is literally popped over my head there. He's the King of Munster, who eventually goes on to become the King of Ireland, according to the Annals of Inishfallen. But regardless, he is King of Munster, And at the same time, he is actually abbot of Munster as well. So he's the head abbot of was archbishop. Sorry, he's the archbishop of Munster as well in Cashel. And he's at war with Cork, and he goes off and kidnaps the Archbishop of Cork as well, brings him back to Cashel and starves him to death. So we do have fighting from various abbots and stuff in the period and stuff, and various members of the clergy. However, to be quite honest with you, I personally don't know of any clergy committing cattle raids or anything, to be quite honest with you. But at the same time, did the likes of St. Finbarrs and stuff have their own cattle raiders to go out and commit cattle raiding is also a very interesting question inside there as well, because I think you could actually easily find evidence inside of that, of the period. First off, I'll pick Mihal and bully him for a wee bit.
No, I mean,
Mihal.
Take into consideration how monastic sites worked, how religious centers worked, how churches worked. You would have groups within groups. So you have, a really good example of all of this actually would be the class known as the earner, who are landholding family, hereditary landholding families with interment lands within the church. These earners are providing the early abbots for the churches before the 13th century, when bishops, something to do with the bishops changed the whole sort of structure in Ireland. Anyway, so they are providing the abbots. They're part of the church council, but they don't. So the running of the church as well, but they don't take. They get tonsured, but they're not actually part of the official clergy. So they, but we know, in this monastic structure, in this clerical structure, you have a small substructure of basically a clan. And they are a clan. These earners are ruling several septs within there. Normally only one or two. Above them could be a corb, who is normally seen as the successor to the saint, whether that's actually a genetic, father-son successor, or just an office successor of the saint who founded the church, who would maybe have a couple of earner tribes, a couple of septs, clans beneath him. Anyway, so we see the structure exists. Now for the raiding, well, the McCarthys of Munster, whenever families sort of seen themselves pushed aside from mainland politics, main kingship politics, they would use the church, sometimes smaller branches, to build back up again. And they would use it to rebuild their power, rebuild their wealth. The McCarthys did this very early on in their history. They come from an earner family who had used part of a kingly group, pushed to the side, became earners, used the wealth of the church to get up. How do you get your wealth? Same way all churches do. And also raiding. They would have been part of, because they would still, raiding is not just an act of violence, an act of aggression. It's also an act of politics. So it would make very much a lot of sense for these families to be taking part in some form of raiding, even ritualistic, So that would be my case for yes.
Definitely happened. Owen O'Neill, I want you to actually answer this one as well, because I know you probably know a good few ones actually, and probably a good banter ones with Hugh O'Neill, I'm hoping.
I'm going to disagree somewhat.
Oh.
I would say that abbots as such, there would have been very few incidents of an abbot raiding. I have one of a bishop, which I'll come back to remind me. But especially after the Normans came in, or the Anglo-Normans, whatever you want to call them, and especially after the Irish Church was reformed and they brought in the more or less traditional Catholic structure. You're right, the Earnochs, yes, but they were religious and non-religious at the same time, but most of them would not have been particularly powerful. Most monastic settlements in Ireland were very small. The actual number of monks or nuns involved would have been very small. Um, Also, post-Norman, um, quite often the Gaelic lords would exert a lot of power over an abbot, over a monastery. And they, like I know, for example, in Armagh, from like the 13th century onwards, although Armagh was right in the middle of O'Neill territory, the bishop or archbishop, whatever he was of Armagh, was usually English, an English speaker, English descent. How much time he actually spent in Armagh is another question. So you would have had very few abbots who were actively involved in raiding. Yes, many abbots would have been involved in politics because many would have been appointed, they've been brother of a king or something. But at the beginning of the 9 Years' War, there is a bishop, and he goes to Spain, and he comes back. He's trying to get Spanish aid, and he's actually killed in 1593 in a raid by some of Maguire's people on the English. He's on horseback attacking, so I'm fairly sure he must be the last Catholic bishop killed in a battle as such, because it looks like he did go in to fight. Other ones were killed, massacred, whatever. But this guy they were attacking the English, and he just got shot by accident. So I think that he was the last Catholic warrior bishop.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, my point is more, like I said, before the bishop reformations. I can't remember the actual. I think it's in 1211 or something like that, where they restructured Ireland and the church and the monastic, and they actually got rid of.
There's various restructuring.
Yeah.
They bring dioceses and stuff.
And the Earner were almost crippled and non-existent, as in the lands. So corps became almost non-existent because the bishops became the hereditary successors of saints, not these corps. And with that came the right to the land, and obviously they stripped away the Earners. But and like you say, there's a lot of these Earner branches are normally, like the McCarthys, are cousins or brothers, close relations to the local nobility, royalty, because the church hold a lot of power, and they need that power to be within their sphere of influence. So it's a large part of nepotism in medieval Ireland. But I would say that, especially in the early church, I tend to feel that just because they're not part of the holy orders, that when he's asking the question of abbots, I'm taking it not as in a literal Norman abbot is there with a spear shifting cattle, but I do. I think my interpretation, just for maybe a bit more clarification, is that when someone says, "Are they involved in a cattle raid?" I'm not just looking at the individual out in the field, knee deep in cow dung, moving the cattle, but also the movement, the execution, like I said earlier, the planning, the execution, and the aftermath. Because I would consider that part of the entire cattle raid, rather than just the actual just going out and doing it for this. It's like being in a battle. You can claim to have fought in a battle if you're the RLC, Royal Logistics Corps, even though you never fired a weapon. You still produce the armor, you still produce whatever. So I think that's maybe where my interpretation comes from, of whether they took part. Just to clear that up.
I actually think there was a Norman archbishop, from the time of William the Conqueror. It could even have been his brother or his cousin, etc., who took part in lots of battles. It's quite a bit outside my field, but I remember reading a book about the Battle of Hastings last year, and this guy was mentioned. I think he was quite a fierce guy.
Yes, is that William? Did you say William of Hastings?
Yeah, William the
His
Conqueror,
half brother.
something
Yeah,
like
William
that.
the Conqueror. Yes, I've read the same thing. Yeah, he. I wasn't. I read stuff a long time ago. He was not loved in the church at all because he was a soldier put into that position. He wasn't a priest. I don't even think he was a Catholic or a Christian. He was just a down brute force soldier, and William just kind of goes, I need you in there because I trust you to
Yeah.
sort that out. So they put a soldier in a church position, and yeah, he still acted like a soldier.
And like you also have the night orders, the knightly orders, the
Oh
knights,
yeah.
the Knights Hospitaller, the Templars, the Teutonic Knights, I think, in the north, the Knights of Avis, and the other ones in Spain and Portugal. Most of those were theoretically clergy, I think, and they were fighting, and I'm sure in the Crusades they were doing. Well, I'm not sure if they were doing. They were doing raiding anyway. In Iberia, they would have been doing raiding, and in the various crusades, whether like in France or in Eastern Europe, I'm sure they were doing raiding as well.
Yeah, the Teutonic Order were raiding the atrocities committed by the
Yeah,
Teutonic Order in Lithuania. They were raiding. They had, they were enslaving women for and young girls for the worst kind of things
yeah.
you can imagine. So yeah, I mean, we can see that how politics and religion sort of obviously overlap and violence.
Lovely. Just heading back up to the comment section where Seamus has a belter of the quote from the War of the Books that was fought between the Southern and Northern Nail because of, what was it, Saint Columba stole a book, and it causes the first copyright war to happen, not just in Ireland, actually throughout all of, I think it's definitely the first one to happen in Europe anyway. I'm not sure about China. China's always, when it comes down to books, China's always a funny one to get involved with and stuff. So a great quote from Seamus there. Another brilliant question from Davey. Cattle is wealth. Sure, even today, never ask a farmer how many cows they have, as you're pretty much asking how much money they are making. Very, very true, to be quite honest with you. And on top of that as well, this is actually the question I was looking at. Do you guys know if they were branding cattle back then, and were bulls more prized than cows? I think we get a little bit of a fair idea about this in the Tawn book. However, when it comes down to cows being branded, I actually don't know any examples, to be quite honest with you. Dr. Owen O'Neill, do you know?
I,
Do you know anything about branding?
I have a feeling they weren't branded because uh, if you look at the numbers, the sheer numbers of cattle, you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of cattle. The effort to brand them is a lot. Whereas you had these large herds, they moved around, and if you lost a few, you could gain a few back. So was there a point in branding? Sort of, I don't even know, like, because in Ireland now, okay, all cows have those things in their ears, those marks. Sheep,
Mhm.
the farmers paint them, but 200 years ago were Irish cattle branded? I don't think it's ever been a tradition here.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. Michal, is there anything you want to elaborate on that one? Or because when it comes down to where Bull is prized, I would definitely say read the book, The Tawn. Brilliant, absolutely amazing book. Definitely, if you're into Irish medieval history, this should be the number one book to read. But it definitely gives you an idea that definitely bulls are prized in Ireland. That's for sure. Mihal, is there anything you want to elaborate on that question before I
I
move on?
think it's just going to fall within the same realms as body paint
Mm,
in pre-Christian Britain, or it's, you're not going to know. And to be fair, there's not going to be any evidence of it because skin rots away. So we're not going to get the archaeological finds unless, like you say, a manuscript comes up and someone says, "Oh, we branded this cattle." And even then, that'll just raise more questions than it'll actually answer. So no, I don't think I'm there's no mention, like you said, there's no mention of it. So I've got nothing to add.
Yeah, I definitely would agree on that one. For anyone who's jumping on right now, thanks very much, guys, for jumping on there. If today we're going to be talking about cattle raiding in medieval Ireland. So if you have any questions on cattle raiding on medieval Ireland, especially in the last half an hour or so, definitely chuck them below, and we will answer them in due cause as I slowly make my way through them. Unless Michal and Owen wants to grab any comments out,
There's one
answer there before we
It's
finish
not.
up.
It's not about cattle raiding. David Jones asked a question about a priest who fought Cromwell forces. There are a few. The last battle of the Ulster Army in the Cromwellian Wars, Owen O'Neill had died, and what should have happened was one of his sons should have become commander, but for some reason, a MacMahon, I think Heber,
Yeah.
becomes general, was made general. He's a bishop. Why they made him general, I don't know, but he manages to make, he was complete and utter disaster. And the Ulster Army is annihilated in a battle it's a very funny name for an Irish name, Scariff Hollis or somewhere like that. It's up in Donegal. And another example is a guy called the Red Priest of Scariff Island. He was an O'Sullivan, I think. He was a friar, I think a Dominican, and he was taking refuge in Scariff Island, which is off Derrynane, kind of in the very bottom of Ireland. And he was eventually caught and beheaded. And his head, you can see his head, it's in Killarney. There's a Franciscan place in a Franciscan church. His head is there. I think they put it on show once a year. Because I was dragged along to see Oliver Plunkett's head when I was a kid, and I wasn't impressed.
Yeah.
But this guy's head is in Killarney.
That's absolutely fascinating. I haven't actually gone off and seen his head yet, but I'll definitely have to take a note of that there. Just heading back over to the comment section there as well. Would Irish wolfhounds be used in cattle raids, and did we use them in wars? Once again, not so much the Táin itself, but if you look at the ventures of the what's the correct word for it? But if you look at the Finn cycles and you look at Cuchulainn and the boyhood deeds of Cuchulainn, it talks about just before Cuchulainn got his name and became, he was originally referred to as Setanta, and he went on and fought the great, what was the name of the wolf again? It was a great wolfhound anyway, and he fought against it. And the wolfhound was protecting the ring fort. So it gives us a good indication there that wolfhounds were used to protect settlements at least during the medieval period. And I know that there were kind of at that point more kind of a wolf than an actual the kind of dogs that we would have today. So they were kind of more vicious back in the day. But other than the example that we have in the Táin, I don't know any other example, to be quite honest. Michal, Owen, do you know any other examples of ones being used either in cattle raiding or during any scenario during periods of war?
Just in hunting, the hunting dogs would have been very common. Guard dogs have been very common. I don't know. There is a myth, but I've seen that like some war game figures for ancient Irish, they always throw in dogs, which I find very annoying. I don't think there's any history. Like every noble in Europe would have had a hunting dog.
Yeah.
And there would have been lots of guard dogs, but the Gaelic Irish didn't use them, as far to the best of my knowledge, in warfare or for raiding cattle as such. They may have brought dogs along to help guide the cattle afterwards, but they weren't used for fighting.
I mean, was there a record of Irish wolfhounds being taken to Rome
Yeah.
and then used in the Colosseum? So, I mean, if and we know that the Romans used war dogs.
Mm.
So, is it possible that by them taking them and using them in the Colosseum, that they are seen as an attack animal? But that is just pure speculation on my part. I'm just sort of waffling some half facts and just trying to put it together there. But I'm just wondering if
I
that's
think
maybe.
if you had a good hunting dog, a dog that could hunt, a wolf could hunt a wild boar or deer, you're not going to waste that dog in a battle. You're not going to like where some guy can just shoot an arrow into it and kill it. It's something that's expensive. You probably trained it a lot, sort of. Like work, there's I think working dogs are now dying out on farms. But like they have their uses, but war wouldn't really be one of them because you can kill them easy enough. Like
Yeah.
if you're hunting down runaway slaves or stuff like that to a certain extent, but dogs on a battlefield, not really.
So maybe we could say that hunting dogs were used in cattle raids, but on the other side, maybe to try and track down their cattle,
Yeah,
like try
yeah,
and chase them down. So they are using the cattle raid as a whole, but not in the actual raiding.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because they could even be used defensively, but I couldn't imagine them being a part of the raid itself. And when I say defensively, I mean just to kind of discourage actual raiders from coming in and stuff. At some stage, obviously, professionals perhaps went in there and, just went around the dog, to be honest with you, depending on the scenario and stuff. But yeah, I don't know, and that I don't really know any examples of dogs actually being used. And Dr. Owen O'Neill is right there. You do, if you're looking at the likes of media, video games, and even miniature games and stuff, you often see dogs being portrayed as, being able to be sent out and attack formations and stuff. But yet, I haven't come across any example in both Ireland and in the continent of dogs being used to attack and undermine a formation of men. I just haven't come across any example of that. Your imagination could go wild on that, but I just haven't found an example of it actually happening. Just continuing the conversation as we just are going into the last 20 minutes or so. So definitely get your comments in below. Any questions you have on cattle raiding, definitely chuck it in there. Just comment there on books. Just to highlight the books that I've been using for researching today. A Guide to Early Irish Law by Fergus Kelly. And also, if you're going to start getting into Fergus Kelly books, I would definitely say, let me just switch the style of this one so you can get a better look. Actually, that's even worse. No, that's even worse again. Yeah, there we go. Fergus Kelly's An Early Irish Farming. Definitely a book to get for this subject today. And also, The Tawn is definitely a book I would definitely encourage people to get. It's more on the mythology side of things, so definitely take that on board. But when it comes down to a great cattle raid and stuff, definitely a book I would advise to get. Michal and Owen, what books would you advise when it comes down to cattle raiding and stuff?
I know Owen's probably got more, so I will just say that if you're looking just on the case in point of any references to war dogs and stuff like that, is to head across to celt.ucc to look at the primary sources like the annals and stuff, where you can have a look and sort of put in, actually look what's being said about the raids and who's taking part at the time. So you've already mentioned the books I used anyway. So.
Yeah, I would definitely say that when it comes down to, sorry.
That source is an amazing source. It's like one of the best things about the internet in Ireland today, because you have so much there in one place. Most is translated, not everything, but it's an amazing source. And like sort of you can jump. Okay, a lot of the translations are somewhat problematic, but you have access if you want to the original So it's a great source. Another book I like is Matthew Stout's book on early medieval Ireland, basically from St. Patrick up to just before the Norman invasion. That's a very good book. It's a very, very good introduction to that period of Irish history.
For sure. Just heading back into the comment section again. What role did mythology figures like Queen Maeve and Cuchulainn play in famous cattle raiding stories? In my opinion, as I explored there, definitely a lot, because in my interpretation, it definitely gives us a good view on how a great raid may have been conducted, especially before 550. So dealing around the period of 2800 BC to around 550 BC definitely gives us an idea of how a good, giant cattle raid would have been conducted at the period, but from a mythology perspective, because geez, it does go a bit wild at times, to be honest with you, with the likes of Cuchulainn by himself taking on thousands and thousands of men. So you do have to remember.
That's true. Any Ulsterman can do that from the rest of
I
Ireland.
take that back. So, just popping over as well, because I don't think we need to have a deep dive on that one, unless we were talking about more of the mythology side. Because the thing is that the Tomba Cooley sometimes when it comes down to mythology side, it does go absolutely wild. To be honest with you. Just the comment section, a few good comments in there. She was the real queen of Connacht. Yeah, I definitely would say many people would definitely 100% agree with you. Another comment there. All cows are very, very beautiful. Yeah, it's a good Irishman comment, Irish woman, Irish man comment to be saying about these. Find dead cow. Okay, bit random, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's for the branding.
Oh
Maybe.
yeah. How often could one beast be stolen over a life period? Jesus, that's a difficult question to answer.
How
Quite
long is
honest
a
with you.
piece of string?
What's that?
How long is a
Yeah.
piece of string?
Yeah. I definitely think that one.
Maybe the cow would never be robbed, or maybe he was each day he had a different owner.
Yeah.
just passed around, because like when I was looking through the Annals of Ulster on UCC .ie Celt or whatever it is, when I was going through the Annals of Ulster there, I did notice that you had certain regions like around Meath and the Kennel Owen territories way up north and around Dublin and stuff, where you have a lot of cattle raiding going on. There's always raiding going on and stuff. But the areas around Sligo and stuff, you do get local raiding and stuff. But then you got periods where maybe, and the problem with the Annals of Ulster is it does take it from the perspective of the men of Ullid. So maybe that's why you don't have too many, raid. They just don't add in the Sligo area, the Sligo kind of Galway, around that whole area.
I would say Sligo was a mess, because it's literally a junction of three kind of big king groups: the Fiacre to the Mayo side of Sligo, the Bruin to the south, and then you've got the Kennel Connell and Kennel Owen. I think Sligo was just like one of those hotspots where you probably maybe not being raided as much as people who were raiding were bringing the cattle through it.
Yeah,
but it's quite a hot spot for
because certainly like the O'Donnells, jumping later, the O'Donnells had aspirations, and sometimes more than aspirations, to control Northern Connacht. And they would they would go into Sligo and Mayo a lot. Hugh O'Donnell in the 9 Years' War, he was quite strong in Sligo, and I know he went very near Galway City. He went down into Thomond, into Clare, on big raids. And I think they would come through or nearby Sligo town on the way back, because you kind of have to. If you want to avoid the lakes of Fermanagh, there is a consistent route from, I think it'd be Sligo to Ballyshannon.
Yeah, Ballyshannon, obviously there's been quite a few famous battles there, and it seems to be a hotspot for crossing into Donegal from that area. I mean, but if like the O'Dowds, I mean, they're more maritime. Are probably the biggest family in that area. But you've got this. I definitely think it's more of a. Again, it comes down to not being recorded because it's just maybe just passing through normal, to the big events. The army passes through Sligo to get to wherever the army passes through Sligo to get to Donegal.
Well,
Fitzgerald's army. So.
I think the problem is as well is that as the name says in the title, the Annals of Ulster. So I do find the Annals of Ulster probably just didn't care what the men of Sligo and stuff were doing at the time. They were kind of like, well, it's just them over there, affect them. I care about what's happening around Meath, Dublin, and Kenilworth territories and stuff. Let's talk about that. I think that's perhaps, even when I was reading through it, I was thinking it's a very kind of biased interpretation because even Munster is lacking so much literature during the period and stuff. I remember
probably only 1% of cattle raids are recorded in the Isles.
Well, that's very true as well.
If you didn't burn down a church, if you burned down a church on the way there and the way back, it would get, the men of such and such a place, they burned down this church and they did loads of other naughty things, but what gets recorded is the church. Because of the nature of most of them are being written down by churchmen.
You see, now you're going into the conspiracy level of like, did they purposely burn churches to be added into history? But God, we could talk about all day. I just want to, just before we finish up with the last 50, we've got 15 minutes left, lads. So if you got any more comments, definitely comment below. Do you ever talk about how the Irish were at one point the dominant power in the British and Irish Isles and colonized parts of Scotland with the old Rita? And took slaves like St. Patrick. We were talking about it last week, wasn't it? St. Patrick and stuff.
But I wouldn't say the Irish were the dominant power.
Yeah, I never. No. A prominent cultural group, society, because we weren't like a homogenous one single nation, but and also even then, it was Gold Gaels kind of held the Irish seaboard. And the Isles. So I think the question is very layered. If you were to break it down, I don't like Owen's initial statement before I just interjected there quite rudely was kind of very on point. I
was just to add in, like, yes, St. Patrick was taken as a slave from Britain. I think nowadays it will be in the north of England to Ireland. It was taken from Britain to Ireland. But we have, in his letter to Coroticus, he's writing to somebody in Britain who has been raiding Ireland and has captured Irish people, specifically St. Patrick's converts, and taken them as slaves, I presume, back to Britain.
Yeah,
like it gives us a fair idea between the letters and stuff and archaeological evidence and the further coming of more archaeological evidence into Ireland that perhaps during the period of St. Patrick and stuff that there was a very powerful war band which may have been the original Nail kicking about the modern day areas of like Donegal or moving around the Tara area and stuff. There may be perhaps evidence that there was a war band kicking around there that may have been the original Nile of the Nine Hostages war band, but we have very, very little evidence of this very, very powerful war band that was kicking around that region. Like myself and Shane Kent literally talk fantasy talk all the time about Nile of the Nine Hostages. What was he like? What was his war band like? But we have very little evidence of that. So to turn around and say, make the argument of, the dominant power at the time of St. Patrick is difficult because we can't even find out what the war band of well, did 9 of the 9 hostages even existed? Because even that topic starts a whole load of arguments. Never mind how powerful was the warband, how large was the warband, how powerful was the warband in Britain, never mind in Ireland itself. So it's one that we still need more evidence about. But at the same time, it is a very exciting time in our own history today because of the amount of archaeological research that's been done into Roman archaeological finds in Ireland. So there is hope that we will find more evidence and hopefully find an entire horde of evidence somewhere around modern day Donegal to Tara. So my answer to that one is hopefully in the future we'll find more evidence to support there being a very dominant warband around that area. Would be definitely my interpretation.
I will just quickly say that someone asked said that St. Patrick was Welsh. I would point you towards Dr. Raoul McLaughlin on YouTube. Does a really good lecture on St. Patrick and his origins. And it, like Owen has said already, it seems most of the evidence kind of points towards what is modern day England, Northern England.
Any other questions?
Raoul McLaughlin.
Raoul or Raoul, I can't pronounce it. Raol.
Okay, good Spanish
McLaughlin. Yeah, well, but with an Irish surname, yeah. He's on YouTube. He sort of covers Roman era.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's a very loose term, but Roman era sort of Ireland. So,
well, the thing is, we need to take note of is that we're dealing with 6th century Britain, which is neither Welsh that we know today or English. It is, Romo Britain. They are their own people and their own culture and stuff.
Good point.
The problem is, I remember it was Dr. Damien Bracken when I was in first year in University College of Cork. He highlighted the fact that it's actually very, very difficult to pinpoint exactly where St. Patrick is from because you're dealing with Romo Britain. That it's not a case of, did he come from somewhere in Wales? Where exactly in Wales did he come from? But because it's all just one big kind of realm, trying to pinpoint exactly where in the Romo Britain realm he came from can be actually quite difficult.
The problem, the problem is the town that is mentioned in the sources around that in primary sources, the town that is mentioned. It doesn't exist. The spelling of it doesn't exist anywhere else. And that has led to the confusion of where he's from. But Dr. Raoul McLaughlin has basically said that based on the vernacular and other sort of evidence of the word, it leads to a location that was already propagated to be one of the sites, because we've narrowed it down to Ravenstone, St. David's, and somewhere in northern England. So Scotland, Wales, and England, but the English location with phonetics and other sort of scholarly sort of sites with this primary word tends to lead towards what is now Northern England.
Yeah, it is a funny one, all right. And as Ulsterman also pointed out as well, like there's a few arguments as well that St. Patrick may have been from Scotland, which at the time would have either been the territories of the Dalriada or Pictland, which is also very, very true as well. Maybe perhaps he was stolen from another Dalriada territory and sold over to the the Enail war bands and stuff, depending on your interpretation. And also he could have been a member of Pictland as well, because he was taken into the Enail territories and stuff. And at the time, the Enails were raiding into Pictland and stuff. So that's also a decent argument to make as well, that perhaps maybe he wasn't Romo Britain. Maybe he was Pictish instead, or maybe he was part of the Pictish Romo world. It's all up for interpretation right now until we find more hard evidence.
What about his sister?
Oh,
yes, it's true. Yeah, what about his sister as well?
Go on. What about his sister?
Because his sister, Saint Dararca, is patron saint of where I live, of Valencia. So she has to be a real person. You're not telling me that Saint Dararca.
Go on.
But even then, the whole story, Kerry, I did a bit of a joke video on it years ago, and how not only are, in our early mythology, Ulster and Kerry connected through the line of Fergal and all these sort of things, and we have similar named Sleeve Mish. There's a Sleeve. Basically, it's the same name for a mountain range in Kerry, but it's a slight, obviously, variation in the name. And then the similar named king groups in the area. And obviously, then you have the myth that St. Patrick is taken by Niall of the Nine Hostages and the Eneal, but actually, the area that he holds isn't held by the Eneal in the 5th century, 6th century. The Eneal don't sort of push out of Inishowen until the 7th century, really. Right. So, was it the Eneal or was it the Dalriada? I kind of lean towards it was the Dalriada, and then that actually took him, and not. I think it's a later story that is Niall of Nine Hostages and.
Interesting. All right.
I mean, he's semi-legendary.
I would continue on. Oh, Michal's completely blown away.
I'm here though.
That captain in a cattle raid.
No. I was just thinking that myself. But anyway, regardless, even if we did lose Michal there, we can hear him. We can hear him screaming as he's slowly being pulled away. But regardless, we've got a last 5 minutes left, and instead of expanding in another question and stuff, I just want to hear from anyone else who wants to finish up there with any last questions, or if you guys want to add into anything else within the last 5 minutes of what we've been saying there, as I quickly go through the comment section to make sure there's no other comments that I kind of left unturned and stuff, because it would be a shame not to answer it now.
There was someone who asked a comment much earlier using some words from Irish, but it seemed completely wrong to me. It was something about like Cailleach meaning fight. Cailleach is an old woman. And Cree, Cree meaning something where it means heart. It actually means heart. It was someone comparing Irish and some Indian.
Oh, was it this one?
Yeah.
The Indian god. Yeah, I have it here.
The Irish for heart is Cree, and Irish doesn't have that backward accent. It's Criodh is Cree. And Cailleach like that is an old hag. It's an old woman. Cailleach or Bera. It's nothing to do with Cali. Yeah, I'm not.
But obviously, we're gonna have echoes of the Indo-European language anyway, and the Indo-European language on the Indian sort of subcontinent is. You've got. I follow a linguist on TikTok, and he often points out these tiny shadows and echoes of the link, but they exist, but you can't suddenly start painting this big picture from these tiny fragments.
Interesting as well. Pumping back over to Wales again. Welsh meant foreigner or something from the point of view of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, mean maybe it's more of who you ask. I definitely would agree with that one, that as the Anglo-Saxons slowly dominate the areas of modern day England and push the native people to the side, to the fringes of society in Wales, that Welsh is, from the Anglo perspective, a play on words of foreigner. So I definitely would agree on that one. And once again, depends on who you ask, because there is different words. If I'm not mistaken, there is different words for Welsh and Anglo-Saxon in the Irish language as well, isn't there? Especially going into, weirdly enough, the late medieval period and stuff, where the English is still referred to as Saxon, aren't they?
Yes, Saxons are Sassenach and Welsh are Belte, which gets anglicized to Walsh today as a surname. But it basically means Breton. But then you've also got the other, all this, what is a national identity? What is your identity? It's, is it the word being described, oh God, signal, being described by others about you, or is it the word you use for yourself? And that argument bleeds into other groups, societies in Ireland, like the Cruithne, and the Gol Gael and all this sort of thing. So I do believe if you look at William, what's his name? Archeo Death on TikTok. He talks about this very specific thing. Yeah, he talks about this very specific topic about it actually didn't really mean foreigner. It's a bit of a. I believe the modern thing is it meant foreigner or slave, but he kind of debunks it a wee bit and expands on it far better than I ever could. So I would check him out.
This sounds quite interesting. I have to have a look at that page myself. What was the page again?
Archeo Death.
Oh, nice. Over on TikTok.
Dr. Howard Williams.
Oh, really? What I'll do is
Dr. Howard Williams, Chester.
What I'll do is I'll get that off you after, and I'll post up for you guys.
The Irish word for Irish, which at the moment is Éireannach, only dates from the 1620s.
1620s. Okay.
Yeah. Before that, you had a word for Sasana. You had a word Gaul and Gaelic. So there was a word in English for Irish before a word in Irish for Irish.
That's interesting.
The Irish word for Irish, meaning whatever the descent, only emerges after the downfall, the political defeat of Gaelic Ireland.
That's interesting. And what about the Ulster? Was it the Annals of Ulster? I think there's what was it called? Sometimes they have like King of Era, and then sometimes they have like King of Gael and stuff as well, which I do find interesting in the Annals of Ulster as well, because I was thinking to myself, is the likes of Flann Sinna and Mael Shocknall the First trying to crown themselves as kings, not just with the Gael of the island, but also the kings of Dublin as well? Like, are they trying to fully emerge themselves as kings of the whole island?
That's a question for another podcast.
Yeah. Especially when we have so much more rapping to do. God, I can't even remember what topic I want to plan for next week because we have so much going on. But regardless, I'll have an old chat with the men and we'll decide what we'll have a conversation about next week. But we'll definitely be here next week on the 22nd. So Wednesday, 22nd, which is late enough for you guys over in Ireland. So hopefully you guys will stay up all night with us again in the middle of the week. But other than that, guys, thanks very much. And also on top of that as well, guys, if you want to support the channel, head over to my Patreon, which you can just click on the link below. Micheál, how can everyone support you there?
Again, just consider becoming a member. Check out the Clans and Dynasties website. That's got a load of links on it. But just come along and say hello on a live, and that'll help the channel load.
Nice. And Dr. Owen O'Neill, how can people support your work and research?
Yeah, if you come on to First Fast, I have buy me a coffee there. You can, on any video, you have a link. Turn up on this live, or most Tuesday nights I'm doing a live Irish history questions. Watch the long videos as well.
Nice.
Comment them, just say hi.
Other than that, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week. Slán go á. Oh my God, just butchered my